And as you can see from the proportions, when people visit the museums, they often ask about the people's size in the Middle Ages. They were not always small. And this also makes the obvious point that this is a custom-made armor with this characteristic Italian feature, which is an asymmetry of the elbows and the shoulders. You see the larger plates that are basically covering the elbow, the left elbow and the left shoulder. And the reason for that is that those armors are always designed for the nobility fighting on horseback. And when they encounter somebody else, the weak spot is the hand that's holding the reins of the horse, assuming they're right-handed. And the encounter takes place on the left side, and they're fighting over this area. So this is the most exposed, most vulnerable, which means that even when it's not symmetrical, the metal is made thicker, and the Italians actually reinforce that protection by making it very large. All museums in the world, except in Vienna, and a place in Mantova, which we could have seen, have only fragments of those armors. A gauntlet here, a thigh piece in Philadelphia, where two thigh pieces are very notorious. They have inscriptions saying Ave Maria, and they're Lombardian, and in other places you will find other very significant fragments, but you absolutely never see a complete armor, especially one that is tailored to the measure of an individual and where the individual is known. So this is an armor from the middle of the 15th century.
Is it fighting?
It's a fighting armor. The closest example is one that was made for the Elector of the Palatinate, Frederick the Victorious, which is kept in Vienna and which was originally collected by the Archduke Ferdinand of Tyrol in Ambras. So tomorrow we'll see actually the place where he collected those armors, and now it was removed to Vienna, but that's the only other complete example from the period. I welcome any questions, because of course there's so much material here.
I wonder the workshops or even the craftsmen that made the armor. There's the fighting armor. What I'm asking probably is, did they specialize? And then you see that extraordinary decorative Italian armor. Did these people do the work? Did they specialize in one area or another, or were they able to be capable of doing it all?
The way they did business in Milan certainly was that for every armor you make a new contract with your colleagues. So you find the people who have the skills to make everything you need. If it's going to have gold, you will hire a goldsmith. If you need to have embossing, you will hire somebody who chisels iron. If you're going to have a commission that involves making very delicate, very beautifully shaped legs, you hire a leg armor maker. Absolutely. And they typically destroy the original contract right after it was implemented. But fortunately, it was often violations, so we have then lawsuits. And we have the minutes that survive in the state archives of Milan, so you'll be able to study those connections. The German, by contrast, has very strict guilds with very rules that prevented this sort of fluid participation, this constant renegotiation, and hiring people that are outside the field that might have just the right skills. So among the highlights, we have to go quickly.
What about the pointed helmets?
I'm looking for the horns in yellow and black horn.
Right up there?
Yeah. There's another one. There are two, but there's one that's particularly striking. Sorry,
yeah. What about the pointed helmets, like on those two and over here?
These?
Yeah.
Yes. So I mean, so here we're in the 14th century, and here we're in the middle of the 15th century. So there's a huge change, and the change has to do not just with the types of weapons that are being used and the change in tactics, it also has to do with fashion. Those are costumes. They're worn frequently. They have to make the wearer look not just good, they have to make the wearer look like impeccable. Right. And so as fashion changes, the form changes, and fashion is different in Milan as it is in Germany. So all these forms have to take into consideration the different requirements of both style and function. But the reason that we're here is also this is a baronial, or I mean it's an armory of the barons and then later of the counts of Trappes. And you see that most of them are plain. Most of them are plain because of course the cost of the material was considerable, and armors covered with gold is typically made at a later stage for higher nobility.
What would that be used for?
So there's a reason that when we talk about heraldry, we say coat of arms. Coat of arms actually refers to the military nature of heraldry. Originally, heraldry was developed as a way of identifying oneself in the field. So people wore certain colors, certain emblems, so that when they're fighting, they will be identified.
Which will give me one, because I'm doing jobs.
Each local family
You
gave
get
their
two?
own arms, and you had to have the education to recognize who was on your side based on their coats of arms. And you might see hundreds of coats of arms that they fusion of battle and say, oh yes, this is a relative of mine, and this is somebody who's also fighting on our side. And in the context of tournaments, great helms, basically they look like a bucket with slits. A very primitive type of armor was worn over one of these pointed helmets without a visor. So it's a double helmet that goes on top of it. And it has a chain that connects it to the breastplate in case you lose it. And it was worn both in tournament and in battle. The ones that were worn in battle, in tournaments, had over the top the crest. A crest that connected to the heraldry. So every family has its crest, and when you see representation of heraldry in these lands, you often have a helm on top with the crest. And those would be made of organic materials and they never survive. This is one of the very few places. In Vienna there is one that came from a monk from an abbey. It was suspended to the tomb of one of the Habsburgs, and that's the only reason it survived. This is the other.
Which one? Show me which one.
I'm talking about this piece here.
The headpiece?
Those horns. And I should confirm this, but I believe this is actually for one of the council match. So you will recognize the colors that we saw on the three birds, the three wings that are within the shield. There's a white round and a blue, and then the blue wings. Interestingly enough, the council match were so organized and the armor was so important, so valuable that they had a stamp made. And some of these very early armors have a punch mark, so that if the pieces are identifiable if stolen, they could easily be recovered by showing this belonged to our family. That means that enough people were likely to use it or had access to the armor.
Yeah. How common is that particular motif?
This one?
Yeah.
The horns are very common, but they come in many forms, and some of them.
Because my mother's family has a cask very much like that.
But the helms are extraordinary. There are about 4 or 5 that are complete.
Well, this is a painting. What is that down below it?
Here?
No.
So this is Turkish quiver. So there are a number of subjects I should touch on rather briefly. Count Traps by 1504 became very high-ranking officials at the court of the successor of Archduke Sigmund of Tyrol was forced to abdicate in favor of Maximilian. And Maximilian became Roman king and then Holy Roman Emperor. And he was tired of having an itinerant court and decided to create a central government for the Holy Roman Empire, which was an absurd thing to do. But he very much wanted to have good administration, and he decided Innsbruck, so very close to here, would be the seat of the centralized government of the entire Holy Roman Empire, which included at the time Flanders, portion of Italy, Hungary, so a very extensive, the Czech Republic, a very extensive thing. And one of the most prominent officials, who was the chief chamberlain, was the Count of Trapp. Hereditary charge, so one after the other would have this role of making the introduction, having close access to the emperor. And as a result of that, they were allowed to commission their armor